Often WWE will make different kinds of games that aren't necessarily wrestling games, but they do have a wrestling background, such as the Twisted Metal ripoff known as WWE Crush Hour. But today we're going to dive into a piece of wrestling history that shouldn't have worked, but for me, somehow this game did work, and I'm talking about WWF Betrayal for the Game Boy Color. Released in 2001 for the Game Boy Color, WWF Betrayal was a bizarre experience. A side-scrolling beat-em-up starring professional wrestlers on a handheld console known as the Game Boy Color. This game had the ingredients for a disaster, and yet, for me, I remember it as, well, not terrible. Let's break down why this game worked when it really shouldn't have. First off, let's set the stage of the WWF at the time. By 2001, WWF was peak in its Attitude Era. Wrestling was everywhere, on TV, in movies, and especially in the video games. But most WWF games stuck to the ring. WWF Betrayal decided to take things outside the ropes, literally. Instead of focusing on in-ring action, WWF Betrayal took inspiration from classic beat-em-ups like Double Dragon and Final Fight. The premise was the Undertaker kidnaps Stephanie McMahon storyline, if you remember that. But someone has kidnapped Stephanie McMahon. Depending on who you play as, you'll get a different outcome in the game, and it's up to you to rescue her. Oh, and if you do succeed, Vince McMahon has promised you a title shot. It's goofy, it's over the top, and it's exactly the kind of absurd storytelling that the WWF fans were used to at the time. Now let's talk about the gameplay. Is it groundbreaking? No. Is it fun? Well, to me, surprisingly, yes. You start the game by picking one of 4 WWF superstars: Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, or The Undertaker. Each has slightly different stats, and you kick, punch, and clothesline your way through hordes of enemies. The moves are basic, but they're satisfying, and the game sprinkles in just enough variety with weapons and environmental hazards to keep things interesting. Each wrestler has slight differences in speed and strength, and each one has their unique finishing move. And the handheld controls made it easy for anybody to pick up and play this game. It's simple, sure, but that simplicity worked in its favor. The controls are responsive, and the pacing keeps you engaged. There's a variety of different stages, including a parking lot where you dodge cars, or a locker room where enemies ambush you from lockers. Speaking of enemies, there's a range of different generic goons to themed henchmen like security guards that all try to take you down as you try to rescue Stephanie McMahon. What's also worth mentioning is the difficulty curve. The game isn't overly challenging, but it does ramp up nicely. The bosses especially add a layer of strategy since each has their own pattern. It's not deep by any means, but it's enough to keep things interesting. So why shouldn't have this game worked? For starters, the Game Boy Color wasn't exactly known for action-packed brawlers. The hardware is limited and the side-scrollers often felt clunky. And then there's the wrestling factor. Wrestling is about flashy moves and showmanship, not walking left to right punching faceless enemies. And yet, WWF Betrayal managed to overcome these challenges. The sprites are detailed enough to recognize your favorite WWF superstars, and the music is catchy as well, and the animations, well, they're decent enough for the time. It's not perfect, but to me, it's not a mess either. This game wasn't trying to compete with the console heavyweights like SmackDown or No Mercy. It was something smaller, more experimental, and that way it succeeded. To me, it felt like somebody pitched to the WWE that we could make a video game out of the Stephanie McMahon storyline, and they greenlit this project. It felt like a labor of love that they really wanted to put this into video game form, and they got it out because the WWF liked the idea. What really makes WWF Betrayal work is its charm. The game doesn't take itself too seriously. It knows it's ridiculous and it leans into that. It's the idea of The Undertaker rescuing Stephanie McMahon or Stone Cold Steve Austin beating up random goons. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And let's be real. Fans really played this game because of the wrestlers. Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, The Undertaker, they were all at peak popularity at the time, and anybody and everybody wanted to play video games that involved them, and getting to see these favorite WWF superstars in a completely different setting was a novel idea. It was enough to make you go, maybe I should try this game out, and you could forgive it because it was a Game Boy Color game. That was enough to make you overlook the game's flaws. WWF Betrayal is not a classic, but it's a cult favorite of mine. It reminds you of a different time. Whether it be the WWF or gaming, this is a period that doesn't exist anymore. When game developers weren't afraid to take a risk, even if the results were, well, unconventional like this game was. The Game Boy Color was a game system that you would pick up and play when you're bored. If you're in the car with your parents or wherever you may be out and about, you needed some time to kill, and WWF Betrayal was that game for you. Starting off, the story is great. You go from Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, or The Undertaker, and you're trying to rescue Stephanie McMahon. You're going through different stages, and every 2 levels you fight one of the other superstars that you didn't pick. And then at the end, there is a boss rush where you have to fight all the bosses, leading up to the final one where it reveals the true motive depending on who you play as. And when you get to the very end, you get the WWF Championship if you beat this game. Now, after you beat it, you can play this game as another WWF superstar to play it all over again, but the story will be much of the same that you had. What I do like about this is that it is a shorter story that you can play, as I said, in the car or on the go, which the Game Boy Color was very good at doing. When you're playing this, you know the experience you're going to get. You're not looking for something that's going to take 1,000,000 hours for you to beat. It's something you can sit down and play for a short period of time, love the experience, and then maybe later on you can pop that game back in again and say, oh, I remember this game, and play it all over again. When I was a kid, I had very many games like this that I would just pick up out of my case and I would pop in and play for a short period of time. It's like the game Tetris. It wasn't a game that you played forever, but you popped it in when you were bored and you played it for a little time. Now, this game is no Tetris, but a side-scrolling beat-em-up is definitely akin to the Game Boy Color as the type of game that you would want to play when you're looking to have a good time. This game is a lot of fun, and I would recommend you checking out if you've never played this game, because WWF Betrayal has a charm that a lot of games don't have, and it really does just look and feel like the WWF Attitude Era all wrapped into a Game Boy Color game. There's not a lot of times where WWF games take a risk like this and say, we're going to do something unorthodox and take it outside of the wrestling ring and make this video game. And Way Forward did that with this video game, and they developed this for the Game Boy Color, and it's something that I still remember to this day. So again, if you haven't checked out this game, I do recommend you check it out. Play it for its charm, beat it from start to finish, and have a good time playing for it. It's a game that should have been forgotten as a flop, but instead, I think it's got a strange little niche in gaming history. And if you had played it, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you haven't, like I said, give it a shot, get the Game Boy Color, and check it out today. As always, I'm TonyPizzaGuy. We'll see you in another video.